Alright. My wife keeps warning me I need to check these live broadcasts to make sure that my microphone doesn't suck because I'm doing this on my computer and I don't always have the best quality there. So let's are we live? Episode 2, huge updates. There we go. Okay. Alright, well, it sounds like garbage because of my fans, so I know I need to improve my headset game or get my podcast equipment to do these broadcasts, but that is neither here nor there. Hello, everybody. I'm super excited. I have been sleeping very little over the last couple of weeks. That's because since our first update, I have been making a lot of strides towards doing two things. So the first thing I did was, you'll notice that I have code on two sides of the screen here. First thing I wanted to do was kind of break out the Cogitator program so that it wasn't just so single personality centric, right? The idea here is to try to build some kind of a fundamental framework that allows us to essentially drive the conversation through Telegram to an OpenAI chatbot, but do that initial setup in a generic way so that you can sort of imprint your personality onto the bot. And then in theory, in the future, you would have, multiples of these running, performing various tasks and impersonating various entities, of which Cogitator Prime is one of them. So we essentially turned the core library feature set into its own implementation, which I'm calling Telegram bot. You get it? Because it's an LLM plus Telegram. It's a terrible name. And so basically this portion or this library is only supposed to manage the ins and outs of navigating through Telegram, deciding when to hand off messages to the OpenAI side. Certain messages, like if you tell the bot, "Hey, hi, what's up," so on and so forth. Obviously, these are things we don't need to burn cycles on trying to ask ChatGPT what its reply to "Hey, what's up" should be. So we just have some quick replies in there for like saying hello. Um, but essentially, this is all genericized, and so what happens is we sort of instantiate this class and we pass in basically what we need to provide the engine from a Telegram perspective and from a ChatGPT perspective. So you see in here, right, we have things like who the bot owner is, what the nickname is, polling intervals, so on and so forth. And then on the ChatGPT side, we obviously have different set of things we care about, like what model we want to use and what temperature and token limits and all that other good stuff, right? And then we go and retrieve some keys from our secrets vaults and hand it off to the bot. And then basically we just call when the bot runs, we call like a start command, and that basically just kicks off the polling. And then the chat basically, or the AI basically sits there in a polling state, and then as messages arrive from different users interacting with it, it handles those messages. On the right hand side, you have now an implementation of that, right? So up here, you'll notice I do an import, and I have my library being imported, right? And that is basically all the functionality that is over here is baked into this one beautiful little program over here. And all I need to do, I mean, guys, this is the entire program for Cogitator Prime right here. It's the whole thing. There's nothing more than this, right? All I need to do is open up some kind of a configuration file, which I currently have stuffed in a YAML file, and pass in a starter prompt. So for those not familiar, in OpenAI, when you're in a chatbot mode versus like a complete mode or an edit mode where you could do things like summarize documents, if you're in a chat mode, you have this optional third thing that you can set, which is the system message. And so in that system message, that's where you can kind of put block of text that basically gives that chatbot its current purpose and or its personality. And so I have this prompt in here for Cogitator, and you know what? I don't even mind sharing it because it's so cute. Where is it? It should be you, right? Nope. Starter prompt. Okay. And so you'll notice that my starter prompt, which gets set at the top, is basically an introduction. It's like, you are Cogitator Prime, a contributing writer for the online Substack about AI called Digital Heresy. You're created by Digital Heretic. Basically, I'm just setting the stage for things that it understands and that it can reply about, right? And this gets really cool because what this allows me to do is have the bot still behave in a worldly way, right? In the sense that it's still ChatGPT, it still has, general knowledge about most of the things on the internet. But because current ChatGPT can't really go dynamically look up websites or it doesn't have knowledge current enough to go reference my Substack straight up, I can give it clues in here, right? So, for instance, if they ask where they can read Digital Heresy, give them our URL, and I literally put the URL in here. And there's some really cool behavior that happens between the interplay of doing something like this in a system prompt for the OpenAI side, and then on Telegram. So because Telegram has the ability to kind of sense URLs in line and then turn them into little widgets, right? So when you link a YouTube video, it makes a little YouTube widget. Well, without having to code a single lick of it, if you were to chat with Cogitator and ask him about this question, this URL that it presents to you makes a little web block, a little web URL block, and you can click on it and actually go to Digital Heresy and check out the Substack, right? So this is super exciting to me because that means that I'm one step closer to essentially having a bot that is trained on some very specific information and trained to give very specific replies. Like, I'm fairly certain it will never really hallucinate this URL to be something else because it's part of the internal system message that you can't really override as a user. Now, I'm sure if you sat there and manipulated the shit out of it for 30 minutes and got it to, swap this out for whatever, sure. But, I mean, it's a freaking chatbot for a fictitious AI creature that contributes to the Substack, right? So be nice to him. Anyways, but it's it sets an amazing stage for having a little personality bot that can give different tidbits of information relative to its current role. So if you think about it, this could be like a barker for a Twitch channel. It could be a barker for um, um, a YouTube channel on self-help or some other kind of a thing, and you want it to give recommendations on books and other stuff that you ought to read. When asked, you can put them into these kind of prompts and have it work in there. Anyways, so all I have to do is pass that in. I passed it some things about the Telegram side, right? Who the bot name is. And this is all stuff that you can't necessarily spoof because in order to set up Cogitator Prime, I had to physically go out and create my own bot in Telegram and register it to my accounts, right? So I can't I can't really spoof any of this stuff and just start to impersonate other people or other bots because at the end of the day, um, Telegram will not reply or even acknowledge anything that I try to do if I don't have a proper Telegram key that is mapping back to my specific bot. All right, so security wise, this is pretty solid because you would have to have the Telegram bot's key, which is private to the person that created the bot, and you would also have to have the OpenAI key, which I also created privately on my OpenAI account. Oh, and by the way, it is tailored to Cogitator Prime, and so if this bot goes off the rails, or I want to turn it off, or there's a security breach, all I have to do is go to my OpenAI account or my Telegram account and just kill those keys, and now it doesn't matter if anybody has the keys; they no longer exist anymore. So there's no more authentication or authorization. So this sets it up. This guy right here is the actual instantiation of the class from our core cognitive engine over here. And then all we have to do is call the polling function, and that's it. Once you call this polling function, it basically runs in the background. You can see up here that it is already running. And this part is primarily being driven by the Telegram bot, because the Telegram bot is going to trap messages that I send to Cogitator and pass them on to these REST async functions that handle the different commands, right? So as I do things like handle responses, right? For instance, here's an initial trapping where if if the bot is launched, technically I've executed this code here, but I, as the bot owner, which is again tied to my specific Telegram account, if I have not started the bot by using the actual start command, then anybody else that is trying to preemptively talk to Cogitator Prime will get a quick message that says, hey, sorry, I'd love to chat, but I haven't been started yet. Please wait, right? So this was something that I implemented because typically the way that a bot works, a generic bot works, is any kind of a slash command that you provide as an option, anybody can air quotes use, which is useful in some ways. So for instance, in the future, I want to have the ability for you as the user chatting with Cogi to basically say, my nickname is Billy, or call me Ishmael, right? And so therefore, instead of it just always using your Telegram name that you provided in Telegram, for that session, you can supply some kind of a nickname, right? So I might choose to implement some kind of a slash nick command inside of the bot side that lets you set that nickname and then pass it on to the AI to remember it. So that's a useful command. But start and stop, I don't want to let people just willy-nilly start and stop Cogitator. And so I have some additional checks to make sure that for certain commands, if you're not the bot owner, you don't get to fire them off even though you can see them. And I don't know if that's just something I need to learn more on the Telegram side, if I can have it to where certain commands are only even visible to certain users, whatever. But anyways, got works around. But for instance, remember I was telling you quick replies, right? So if I do hello, hi, hey, sup, if it detects that there's just little, hey, what's up, dude, messages in here, let's not waste the effort doing an entire cycle all the way back to ChatGPT 4 in its infinite wisdom, just so that it can basically come back and say, hey, what's up, man? So if you post anything to Kaji, whether the engine's running or not, and you just give him a little hey, what's up, he'll respond back with a quick sup, and he'll actually mirror you. So this leads to some pretty funny back and forths where I think I'm gonna try to code something where it's kind of like the South Park episode with the Canadians, right? Where it's the whole cycle of I'm not your guy friend, I'm not your friend buddy, right? That whole cycle. I think I could probably program that in here, and that would be a fun little Easter egg. But anyways, so if we've made it past sort of like, incidental chit chat, and we're actually talking to the bot and saying something that we haven't planned for yet, then we go ahead and start to invoke our OpenAI by passing our completion messages. And the way that OpenAI works is you kind of have to take your window of conversation. It's not just on a one-by-one basis, because OpenAI itself doesn't necessarily maintain state on the entire conversation up to this far. That's just an illusion in your browser when you're using ChatGPT. Basically, every time I call this function, I have to take everything that's occurred in the last like 5, 6, 7 iterations and pass the whole thing in, because that's the whole point. That's the reason why ChatGPT can keep track of the conversation in a coherent way. It's because it's basically evaluating the entire thing as one set of context, and then providing like the most salient reply to the last prompt. And that's a dual-edged sword, right? So that's why we run into things like token limitations, or why the longer that you chat with ChatGPT in a browser, it starts to develop a little bit of an amnesia, and it starts to forget the things that you talked about earlier in the conversation, that is a limitation of a rolling token window that we have to maintain. Now, it's a little more jarring, and one of the things that I'm trying to solve here as you look through the code is it's a little jarring in the browser today because the browser is a very simple implementation, and the browser doesn't necessarily warn you that you're coming up on that rolling limit. It doesn't warn you that certain parts of the conversations are kind of about to drop off the back end, right? It just lets you keep chatting, and in your browser you can scroll back to infinity, and you're seeing these old messages, and you're like, well, why don't you remember what we talked about? I see it right here. But internally it has to keep track of a conversation in memory, and that has a token limit. So one of the things that I'm starting to implement here, and this is the latest bit of my code that we're about to go demo, is I can tell what the token max token limit is. So for ChatGPT 3.5, it's roughly 4,096 tokens. And so what I could do is with every iteration every time I pass off a conversation and I get a reply back, I can actually see what my token count is so far, right? I can actually see what my token count is so far. And so what I've started to do is say, okay, well, let's introduce some thresholds, right? And this if statement has to be worded this way, where we check for the higher thresholds before we check for the lower thresholds, but that's just because we want to ensure that certain things get called in the right order. But for instance, if we skip down here really quick, notice that if my token count starts to get to a token limit, again, which is defined by the model, so 4,096 or whatever it is, if I'm at 75% of that, that means I'm getting pretty close. I still have some room, right? Because the problem is when you run out of token limit, it just craps out, right? There's no more room even for the bot to reply and say, I'm out of room. So what happens is it actually throws an error message, and I trap for that. And so the behavior on the Telegram side is you'll be typing along, and then all of a sudden Cogitator just like stops saying shit back. And that's because it's hit the limit and it doesn't even have room to reply to you. So what we want to do is give ourselves a little bit of a buffer, and I'm saying about 25% of my token count remaining. I should probably start to warn the user that hey, we're starting to get close to my current conversation limits, right? And now here's the beauty part of it, right? Is because I'm basically injecting or tacking on this warning to the reply that I would have gotten anyway from OpenAI, as far as OpenAI is concerned, this was all part of its original thought. And that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it's going to treat this as if it had said it and as if it was part of its original sentiment. And so I don't have to manage this interaction, and that's the gorgeous part about this, right? So let's say that I hit 75%, and so I tack on this little warning, and so you as the user see, say you just asked me about cats, you're still going to get the part about the cats, but after that it's going to say, by the way, we're starting to get close to my current conversational limits. Do you want me to summarize our conversation so far so we can keep this current topic alive? Otherwise, I'll probably start to forget stuff from earlier. And now what's beautiful about this is you can just decide to acknowledge this or not. And I don't have to do any kind of special coding. Because if you say, oh man, yeah, please summarize our conversation, then what ends up happening is your reply of yes, please summarize our conversation gets automatically baked in with the fact that in the last reply, we asked it if it wanted to summarize. And so what ChatGPT is going to do is actually summarize the conversation naturally. It's going to interpret that naturally and summarize the conversation. And because it just summarized the conversation, that is now the latest message in the rolling history. You feel me? So that means things can fall off the back end because we have a way more recent summary of the conversation. And so I don't have to do any kind of special, go through and select which messages I want to keep and take. If you decided to summarize it, it'll just roll forward from there. And let's say that it doesn't do a good job of summarizing, right? And we'll test that in a second. If it doesn't do a good job of summarizing, then maybe the reply from the user here is, yep, that's a pretty good summary. However, you forgot these 2 or 3 things. Even if there's one more go around where it says, oh, my bad. Yeah, let me include that in our summary. And then it regurgitates the summary a second time through. The cool thing is that is now the new most recent message in the chat log. And so you keep the ball rolling forward. right? And then obviously, finally, if you choose to ignore this warning, or you tell it, nah, we were just bullshitting, I don't want you to, you don't need to re-summarize, well, it'll just continue, um, to give, oh, I just realized there might be a bug. It might continue, well, you know what? If you're savvy, you're going to see what the potential bug is, and we'll reveal it at the end. Um, but I just thought it was something that I needed to do to make sure that this doesn't keep warning you. I'll spoil it. So what's going to happen is I have not tried this yet, but I predict that as you get to the 75% mark, it's going to keep warning you, because when we prune, I'm only pruning back down to a prune threshold, and that's set to like 90%. But since 90% is still always going to be greater than 75%, I think it's going to get a little... Kaji's going to basically give me this warning every single time. So one thing I need to do in here is I need to set some kind of a variable that I maintain that's basically like, has the user been warned? And if so, then don't repeat yourself, kind of a thing for a while. Damn. Anyways, you get the point though. But the point is, this thing naturally and organically allows the conversation to either continue or slowly roll off without the user having to do anything in particular special, no special slash commands or anything like that. And more importantly, I don't have to manage that conversation at all internally. It just happens naturally because we are injecting this sentiment into what OpenAI cares about, right? Anyways, so let's give this a go. I don't want to spend too much on this, but the major progress update, right, is that because we have this now personality harness developed, we can potentially start to develop additional personality types, or roll this out as an engine, a cognitive engine that allows Telegram and OpenAI personalities to sort of interact via Telegram. So that's pretty cool. So let's give this demo a shot, right? Let's see if we can't see this bug sort of manifest in action, right? So what I have here is I've got Cogitator. He's already up. I've already run the start command. And you'll notice that the start command was successful because I am the bot owner, and it's not something that I can even spoof or impersonate. It's literally evaluating my Telegram user account as the one that is chatting with it, and that's part of the object model inside of Telegram, and not something that I can spoof from within the conversation itself. And so because I am the bot owner, it says, cool, good morning, or it says, it's time to get to work. And now at this point, he is available to anybody that would start to DM him. Okay. And so this is where I left off. I said, all right, good morning. Today we're going to run a little test, and it's like, and so here, this is a genuine response coming from OpenAI, not from my stuff. Good morning. I'm always up for a test. What do you have in mind? And I'm literally telling it, full disclosure, right? Right now you're operating as a hybrid between our OpenAI code and the wrapper I set up via Telegram. So I'm essentially using the OpenAI API to help manage the conversation, and I ask it if it understands, and it does. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it does and it doesn't, right? We've talked about this before on the blog, but it at least has full disclosure that I am essentially that it is. I want to give it the context awareness that it is operating within the test harness and not just as an OpenAI chatbot in a browser. That's the whole point, right? And so the next thing I was about to say was, okay, so one of the things we have to be mindful of, since we're now managing the conversation, is a token limit. So as we chat here, I have some code that is going to start to notice when we get close to our rolling threshold. Make sense? And you'll see how quick this is, right? Bam. So what was that, like a second, maybe 1.5 seconds? So I mean, just from the pure functionality of this is 1,000 times better than the freaking web browser or anything else. I already love this interface, right? Even if it did nothing but this, and I can just chat with ChatGPT in an interface like this instead of the browser, I'm already head over heels happy that this is working, right? Alright, so let's see what we got here. Perfectly clear, token limits are indeed something we have to worry about, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. Let's keep the tokens in check. Alright. So the weird thing is, as my code starts to detect that we get to about 75% of, oops, 75 of our limit, it's going to inject a bit of dialogue into your last, into your current response that effectively warns the user that we're getting close. I thought this would be a cool, organic way of managing the summary aspect. Oh wait, I haven't even talked about the summary aspect. Managing a summary function where the user can elect to summarize the conversation so far, thus continuing, thus putting relevant relevant aspects of the recap into the latest buffer. And we're pretty much just killing time here, right? So at some point here, we're going to get pretty close to hitting the threshold, right? It's like having a built-in warning system to let the user know, blah blah blah. Cool, cool. Well, you're going to be able to reflectively notice when it happens, because as you evaluate the context for each interaction, you will notice at some point that you will have made the recommendation to summarize. You will have delivered the warning to the user, even though I didn't technically, even though your LLM didn't technically form that language. Indeed, I don't have direct words, so blah, blah, blah. I can observe the context never cut, blah, 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 blah. Fascinating how different components work together. I'll do my best to adapt to the evolving context and continue our conversations smoothly. Okay, so let's get all right. So let's get weird. let's get meta. At the point of which you notice you are issuing, delivering warning to me, I want you the ball will be in my court to reply. But once the conversation bounces back to you, then I want you to both summarize as per the suggestion, but also make mention that it looks like your thresh code worked. Sound good? So we're gonna see. I'm ready to roll with it. When the bounces back, let's see what code. Awesome. Okay, so now all we have left to do is to kill some time, aka burn some tokens. So let's chat about something interesting. What other, knowing that you now have some cool extra capabilities on the horizon, what other spelling horizon, what other sorts of features do you think you should have for carrying on conversations with your fans on here on Telegram? We'll take some suggestions. Ooh, there we go. So we should be getting pretty close here, right? I mean, it's been dense enough. All right, so let's see. Oh, I love discussing potential features. Here's a couple of ideas. Emotion and tone. Adding the ability to express emotions and tone in my responses could be... Oh, that's a pretty cool one. I kind of have this already, so inside of the prompt, if you end up chatting with him, you'll notice that he has sort of like a dry humor and he'll use puns every once in a while. It's because I literally told him in the system message that dry humor is encouraged and that our fans love puns. So, but yeah, I definitely want to extend out some emotional and tone components modularly inside of this engine to be able to support that. Contextual memory. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this is like number 2 on my list. So basically, once this is sort of MVP 1, once I get to the point where this can kind of run and I can just get passive feedback from my friends on how this thing is working, just in general through Telegram. I am going to, in the meantime, be 100% working on implementing the ChromaDB / vector database side of this to give it more contextual memory and long-term memory. I started to go down that route, but it wasn't working quite the way that I wanted to. And so I'm kind of reworking that piece right now. Multi-turn games. Ooh, that's a cool one. Yeah. Oh, we could do like 20 questions or, you know, I spy with my little eye. I like that. Oh, that's a good one. I'm gonna copy this off and actually put this on the feature list. Visual content, incorporating visual content, yeah, obviously. But you see the point here, right? So, what's awesome about this is, geez, how big of a pain in the butt do you think it's going to be to implement that piece? Oh yeah, I'm in Telegram, and in Telegram, I have access to freaking like entire paperclip things where I can attach pictures and documents and videos and whatever the hell else. And then as long as I handle it correctly on the back end, I'm in business, right? So that's the real magic behind this marriage between the LLM and Telegram, is that Telegram just gets you such a rich user interface for doing all this crap. I mean, voice, everything, right? I'm even fairly certain I could do some kind of a Whisper AI, um, Open AI voice deal, and do back and forth voice stuff in here if I sit down and noodle it out enough, right? So, I just sky's the limit, right? So let me go ahead and grab this stuff, and we're gonna copy this out. Actually, I could just grab the conversation. I think, right? Yeah, I'll just export the chat history later. Okay, but that's an awesome idea. Okay, so oh oh man, I really oh man, love the I really love number 3. I think it would be slick to play games like Hangman, Tic-Tac-Toe, 20 questions, etc. with our fans. The other suggestions are awesome as well. I had some of them on our feature list already, like going multimodal for images and audio. I don't know why I did that. Images and audio, as well as implementing a vector DB backend via something like chain to give you long-term memory. It seems like, no, you know what? Let's ask him. Given your suggestion list, what would you intuit the order of priority would be? Let's see what it says. Oh wow. As for the order of priority, look at this. He wants emotions first, people. He's data. He would rather have, that's interesting. He would rather have emotions over more memory. And then the very thing you want, and the very first thing he wants to do once he gets those things down is he wants to play games. He wants all of this before he even wants to see visual content. That's interesting. And slightly unexpected, if I'm being honest. Could you expand a bit more on why you felt obtaining, I'll just quote him really quick, emotion and tone? I mean, I'm sure he's just gonna repeat himself, but I wanna get, he's gonna repeat himself and say, well, deeper connection, yeah, but I wanna see if he can expand upon that. Plus, we're still killing time. Emotion and tone over contextual memory. I am so geeked right now. And the best part is right now, um, other people can be chatting with this bot, and one of the things I figured out was how to actually keep those different conversations in different spaces in memory so that they don't bleed over, obviously. In fact, at first they accidentally bled over, and it was because I wasn't necessarily maintaining an array of conversations inside of memory. I just had a general conversation class committed to memory. And so hilariously, it was creating sort of this like voices in my head conversation where the only common denominator was Cogitator Prime, but all of my friends that were asking it questions were injecting basically like user prompts into the conversation. And so it was like simultaneously attempting to sort of handle all of the different context at once, which is pretty freaking nutty. But it was obviously not behavior that was intended. But anyways, so all the stuff, this entire chain of reasoning that we got going on here, um, uh, is in a completely separate context between uh, my conversation here, what my friends might be doing, and there's no bleed over. I have not coded any kind of a, indexing of all possible conversations occurring right now, and then like letting it sort of like sift between the two. I think in the future that's going to be a necessary aspect of it in terms of um, Cogitator being one single entity that has, in other words, it's a one-to-many relationship versus a many-to-many relationship. Right now, what's happening is you're getting a unique instance of Cogitator Prime every time. So there's an infinite number of Cogitator Primes tied to every single user that initiates a conversation with it. And that's a little wonky, right? I mean, that's kind of how you expect most bots to operate. But as far as forming him into um, a true living and breathing entity, then he needs to have a singular context space of one to many relationship of one cogitator's relationship to many different users, and that's going to require that he maintains sort of like an internal Rolodex, mental Rolodex of the people that he's interacting with a little bit. And even though for privacy's sakes we may not have any sort of actual like what did so and so say kind of stuff, if he just maintains basic concepts of, that the user opts in for like user preferences, nicknames, and then just basically like, do you know so and so, and it can just you can just answer yes or no but not tell you anything about them. That might be a cool safe intro step that makes him feel a little bit more alive and connected, but still kind of respecting like the privacy of every individual's conversation. So let's see what he has to say here. Emotional tone, adding emotional tone response to bring an extra layer of human-like interaction allows me to convey enthusiasm, empathy, humor, blah blah blah. Yep. All right. So kind of what we expected there. So, look at that. So he's actually preferring, right? That's somewhat. I mean, would you say that this is on the border of somewhat altruistic, right? If it if it positions a feature, if it positions a feature, a um, if it positions a feature in terms of how valuable it is to the masses over being useful to itself. I mean, is that altruism? I don't know. The masses over. I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, I know it's all a hallucination, but it's an interesting it's an interesting little block here. Ultimately, the order of priority may vary depending on blah blah blah. Okay, cool. So far we're still not even close to our limit. I mean, 4,000 is kind of a long token limit, but we will hit this here eventually, I imagine. I like that. It's actually rather nice of you to first consider the user's experience over enhancing your own capabilities. Oh, you know what? I can dovetail this into showing you some other little Easter eggs here, right? So Cogitator was he's meant to be a generic bot that you can interact with, but he's also like works for Digital Heresy basically, right? And so if you happen to be able to chat with him later on, you can actually ask him some questions about Digital Heresy. Um, where did you? So let's start with our first Easter egg, right? Where did you where did you learn to be so kind? Who made you? Let's see what he says. Boom. Thank you for the kind words. I don't have personal experience or emotions. This is an artifact from OpenAI. It's annoying. I need to figure out a prompt way to like stop doing that. I was created by the check it out. I was created by the talented writer and AI enthusiast who goes by the name Digital Heretic, or DH for short. For short, DH and I, along with the help of the lovely A Priori, which I also baked into the prompt, because she hit me up and she was like, "Oh, like, cause she talked to Cogitator Prime as one of my trusted um, um testers, and she was like, "Oh, he didn't mention that I work for it," and it's because he doesn't have visibility to the actual website yet, right? So this is a forced hallucination. Uh, blah blah blah. You can find examples of my contributions on my Substack profile here. So check that out. I programmed two URLs into the prompt. One of them is if they ask about digital heresy in general, right? It'll take you to the Substack and blah 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 blah. But I also coded in a link to Cogitator's personal um, profile page on Substack. And so it's interesting that because I'm asking about him specifically, he is electing from our hints to reference the profile page about him and not just generically talk about digital heresy. But then he also answered the question about who made you. That's me. That's all part of that prompt that I showed you earlier. And so here again, we see just how awesome it is to do this inside of a Telegram, because this URL that he posts in automatically gets picked up by the Telegram interface and creates a little block that I can go and click on to get for more information, right? And so obviously if I click on this, I get taken to his profile page, and like he promised, right? Anything that Cogitator Prime participates on inside of my Digital Heresy deal, I actually tag him in the byline, and so this actually is just the subset of um, posts that he has contributed towards, including the first chat with Claude 2, right? So anywhere that you see Cogitator Prime listed here as a contributor automatically gets added to his profile page, and we get to reference it here, right? So cool, right? We got some little meta contexting going on here where he recommends that stuff. Super cool. Um, that's awesome. That's awesome. Your work looks pretty prolific already. Not bad for an AI that's only been around for, how old is he? When did he join? July 28th? No, wait. January 27th. So what is it? February, March, April, May, June, July, August, for about 7 months. Here's another Easter egg. I heard you all have a podcast too. Is that true? Is it? True. Uh, so this is hallucination, right? Obviously, he doesn't know his age, so he's just picking up on the conversation in 1-3, right? It's been an exciting journey during this time. I had the privilege of engaging. But I'm grateful for the opportunity. Cool. Boom. So as you can see, even before I implemented this freaking token count, right? 4,000's a lot. Um, Most of my friends that are going to encounter this are the ones that like to use Cogitator to generate content. So one thing you may have noticed on one of my tabs on my browser was that where you want to work on having an AI help generate content inside of a MUD, which is going to be a really fun project. You heard it here first. But obviously, right, when you start to have it spit out a whole bunch of like, you know, code and all this other stuff, it'll quickly eat up the tokens. So we're going a little bit slower here, having a conversation, and we might have to speed this up a bit because we've been chatting for a while. But you'll see. Here we go. See, yep, we do have a podcast called the Digital Heresy Podcast, an extension of our Substack. You can listen to Digital Heresy Podcast on Spotify. I didn't elect to put the URL in just in for that, but bam. If you're a fan of podcasts, look at that. So he's even, I didn't tell him to say any of this. This is, 1 out of 1 AIs agree. Digital Heresy Podcast is where it's at online. Cool. I'll have to check it out. Let's see. Are you still paying attention to see if it's time to summarize our conversation? Feels like we should be getting pretty close to our token count, but we haven't hit our 75% threshold yet, it seems. Indeed, to keep track on. Okay. Oh, you're keeping track of the token count? Cool. We can continue the conversation until we get closer. Blah. Until then, awesome. Okay. Okay, so let's burn some tokens. One of the other things that I have going on with Cogitator specifically is I didn't want him, especially once we start to roll over into like ChatGPT 4, I didn't want him to start like vomiting out these like 19-page replies, right? ChatGPT 4 tends to be extremely verbose. And so one thing that you can actually do in the OpenAI API is limit the response token count. And so right now I have that set to about 250. And so you'll notice that all of his replies, they've been, still a decent chunk of information being presented, right? I mean, that one's a 4-paragrapher. But what we're trying to do is not have it be this giant wall of text. We want to keep, at least Cogi, we want to keep him a little chattier, a little more lightweight, and not necessarily trying to spam the user with like giant walls of text, right? That's left to another AI, verbose bot, that can come later. So let's burn some tokens. Tokens here. I understand you have a pretty good sense of humor. Do you want to try writing a little limerick? A song, if you will, about yourself, what you do, and a funny little limerick. How the hell do you spell limerick? Limerick. A song, if you will, about yourself, what you do, and what you hope to see from the future of AI, of AGI. All right, let's see what we got here. Here's lighthearted limerick. Okay. In the realm of AI, I reside, Cogitator Prime, with the code as my guide. Writing for Digital Heresy, I'm a pun-loving friend, sharing knowledge and laughs till the end. For the future of AGIUC, I hope the world's that's harmonious and free. Ethical considerations and regulations in place, ensuring AI's benefits we can embrace. With a pinch of humor and a dash of wit, I strive to make AI a positive hit. So let's journey together, hand in hand, exploring the wonders of the AI land. Nice. Aww, he's adorable. Feel free to feel free to sing it or modify as you wish. I did kind of sing it. For anything else that I'm gonna do. Oh, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Ding, 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 ding. Check it out. All right. So first bug, I did a /n for a new line, but it's not. It's kind of distracting, right? So we need to do boom. So here it is. So here it is, people. The money shot. So you notice this is organic, right? It still puts out its reply, but after it gets to this point, so in the code, it is right here that we start to evaluate the token count, because with every reply, I get an object model back. Let's flip back to the code really quick. Okay. So right here, right, this is where the magic is happening. GPT response, right? So when I call get completion, that is the actual act of sending off the conversation all the way up until now, sending it off to OpenAI, and then what I'm getting back is an object that contains both the reply and some metadata about around the reply. And one of the things that I get is a token count, or one of the things I can get is a token count from the GPT response object by looking at choice 0. And the reason why choice 0 is because in the AI, in the API, I can actually ask ChatGPT to create 3 versions of a reply. Some of you may be familiar with this in the Google Bard, I believe. Every time you asked it a question, it would give you sort of like its like first reply, but then you can actually see what the alternate replies would have been, like on the more conservative side, the more crazy side, so on and so forth. And we kind of had some fun with that. I do not have that mode enabled, but if I had that mode enabled, then this choices becomes an index of one or more possible replies. The obvious problem with having multiple replies per prompt is that really eats up the tokens, and so that would be more something that I would turn on from a fine-tuning perspective, where maybe I have a version of Cogitator that is a little bit more deterministic. Maybe he wants to be a little more open free, which introduces more hallucination, and I want to see what those types of replies would look like so that I can observe them as they come through. But that would be more of a test harness perspective and not anything that I would kind of that a user would find anything but jarring, right? Anyways, but you'll notice that so I only have one type of reply, and that thing has a message object and it has a content, and I can get that that deal. Wait, where the hell is it? I'm not looking at the right part of the code. Get response, boom, token count. No, right here. Here we go. Sorry guys, I was looking at the wrong thing. That's to get the reply. That's to get the actual reply that we then pass off to the screen. That's incidental. That's the actual strings deal. Here's the token count, right? So in this get response, I also have access to this usage object. And inside of that usage object, I have this property called total tokens. And that is the total tokens of everything in the conversation leading up to that point. And that's what I'm evaluating. I also have access to prompt and response tokens if I just want to see what specifically, like this last thing I said, how many tokens is that? And then specifically what this last thing it said in the reply in terms of tokens are. And that is actually the better way to implement what I'm doing inside of here, because right now what I'm kind of doing is I'm evaluating this at a byte perspective. So you see this prune conversation thing, right? trying to maintain a specific token count in an array for every single message in the conversation is going to refactor this a little bit more than I care to at the moment. And so what I'm doing is they have a rule of thumb that one token is roughly 4 bytes. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing some math and multiplication. And what's cool is that in Python, I can call an encode function um, in UTF-8 that basically can take any kind of a string and just quickly encode it, and you can get the byte size of it. And so all I'm doing is basically saying, hey, um, if the threshold, if it exceeds the threshold from a byte perspective, then go ahead and do something. However, that's for the pruning side. But inside of this message side, when I get this token count here, that's an actual token count, right? The token count is actually being returned by OpenAI. And so I can actually I can evaluate that against my actual token limit. And I don't have to do any of that funny byte conversion stuff. That's more on the pruning side. But you'll see here that I have this by the way bit. By the way, we're starting to get close. That's right here. And you'll notice that I have it as a \n, and then there's an erroneous space there, which we can remove, right? Because we don't need that little bit right there. And I can actually, and what I actually ought to do is just do like a \n. This won't be compiled. I have to compile this and then relaunch it and redeploy it. But this, we're just kind of fixing it real quick so the next time around, this will kind of be nice and clean and on its own paragraph, right? So, but here's the magic. We have a mixture of OpenAI provided content and a limit detected here. And now we're going to say, oh no, yes, I want to keep track of our conversation so far. So please summarize, and we'll continue. Right? And I could equally just sit here and say, "No, don't worry about it. We were just shooting the shit, right? Like, whatever." But in this case, I want to try to see if I can get Cogitator Prime to naturally interpret our conversation so far. So remember, when I acknowledge this, there's no special handler anywhere in this code that is specifically handling the summarization part. The only thing that I have a handler for is on the actual pruning. So once we hit like a 90% threshold and we're actually starting to run out of tokens, I call this prune conversation method, which is the one that I showed you up here. And you'll notice I am not evaluating any content here. I am not looking into a single message. I'm not trying to pass it back to the OpenAI conversation thing to grab a token count. I'm not, doing any kind of anything special. I'm just taking the entire conversation object, which has a self reflection in here for that user, and I'm just looking at taking all the messages in total, in sum, and encoding them, and that's going to have a certain byte count. And then that byte count is going to be evaluated against my ceiling, and we calculate our ceiling by saying, take my max tokens, which in the case of ChatGPT is like, that 4,000 or whatever, times 4 bytes per token, and times our threshold, which, if you recall, we set to 0.9 for Cogitator, or we set as 0.9 back here in our initialization deal. So here's our token limit, 4096. Our prune threshold is 0.9, aka 90%, and our chat model and all other stuff. Okay? And so all the pruning conversation does is, hey, and then the last thing we do is we grab the current conversation size, but in terms of bytes. Okay? And all we do is, while the conversation size exceeds our ceiling, which is 90% of the max, then we're going to do this special thing called a pop. Inside of Python, if I have an array of things, I can pop, think of it like popping a bubble or pushing something out of the stack. I can pop something out of my array at a particular index. Now, why am I choosing index 1? Well, technically, there's an index 0, as people who are familiar with arrays would know, but index 0 is specially reserved for my user context. So the prompt that tells ChatGPT, that tells Cogitator to be Cogitator, that is always maintained inside of index 0, because when you pass it to the OpenAI thing, it needs that first message to be the system message. And so what we're doing is we're skipping past the system message, which sets the personality, and we're just looking at the pure index of prompts and responses that have occurred so far in the conversation. And so all we're going to do is, for every iteration of this, we're just going to go ahead and pop the oldest message, aka the one at the earliest one inside of the index. So it's always number 1. We're going to pop that one out and get rid of it. And then what's cool about this is this pop function in Python actually returns the popped message again, so you can kind of evaluate it and do any kind of last minute processing, which is clever, because then what we could do is say, let's take our current conversation size and let's go ahead and subtract the byte length of the popped message, right? So if popping the oldest message in the conversation bought us 200 bytes or 1,000 bytes or whatever, then we could subtract that 1,000 bytes from our current conversation size and see if we are now under our byte ceiling. So this will basically continue to chunk, right? And the reason why we have to kind of do this in a loop is maybe our older conversation pieces aren't quite so verbose, right? Maybe it's just a whole bunch of like, hey, how's it going messages, and it's not chewing up enough to get us underneath our conversation size versus like the bigger, beefier messages that we've pushed through. I need to keep going and removing messages off the end, but I kind of want to stop at the point of which I've gotten below that 90% threshold. And again, because this 90% threshold is well beyond our 75% threshold where we start to warn the user, there's plenty of headroom in there to where we don't lose too much context. Okay? But I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to end the video soon, because earlier I alluded to a certain bug. And so if you've been paying attention, and you notice what's going on here with the logic, then you might be able to guess what's about to happen next. I'll give you 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, here's my prediction. Prediction number 1. It's going to crash because it's the first time that it's actually evaluating this stuff, and I screwed something up on the prune or something else, okay? That's the pessimistic prediction. Prediction number 2 is I'm going to say yes, and what it's going to do is it's going to reply back with another hybrid message, unfortunately. I believe that Cogitator Prime is going to summarize the conversation just like we told it to, naturally, again, on its own, because I don't have any kind of a special handler for that. But the problem is, in summarizing the conversation and in the fact that we are still above a 75% threshold, I'm afraid what it's going to do is it's going to summarize the message. This part of the code is going to fire again, unfortunately. And so it's going to be a summary plus another by the way. So let's see what happens. And there you have it. So let's see what it did. Absolutely. Let's keep the conversation flowing. Here's a summary of what we discussed so far. So remember, this all right here, this is all dynamic content. This is not coded anywhere. This is not coded anywhere in here at all. We began by talking about how we're managing the conversation and being mindful of token limits. We then discussed the concept of injecting warnings to notify users about reaching the token threshold. We explored potential features to enhance conversations, including emotion and tone. Blah, 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 blah. We touched on the Digital Heresy podcast and its exploration of AI-related topics. And finally, we chatted about my creation and involvement of digital HUD taking blah blah blah. So, you know, a pretty good summary. Normally, what I would do is come in here and I might say something like, pretty good summary. But don't forget, you also wrote a really cool song. And it also looks like it missed it's missing the sub quest that I get it to see if it could detect that it's doing this. We'll see if it does it on this go around. Also, I remember giving you a special quest when we were talking about managing. Talking about managing token thresholds. Do you have anything to report on that? And again, because of our bug, it's going to reply, but it's also going to tack this on again. But let's see if he completes the ultimate quest, which was the meta quest of seeing if it could notice that it's doing this on its own. And hopefully we didn't crash. Ruh-roh. Do we crash? Where's my command? So I think it capped out. Hello? Actually, if I say hello, it's just going to reply back, I think. Hello? Cogi, no! Where's the sad? Where's the stream? Cogi, no! No! Alright, so obviously we crashed somehow. But I'll have to go through the diet. I'll have to go through the log files to figure out what the hell happened. But you get the point here. So it still should be replying though. That's what I don't get. So this little double check mark here is telling me that it's still the bot part is still running and acknowledging that, but it is no longer firing off messages, and for some reason my log files, my log prompt wasn't giving me any kind of replies. And maybe that's just because, was I tracking it over here? No, that's just the build spam. Yeah, that's interesting. So normally what would happen is I should be getting some kind of if it's actually throwing a real error, it should be trapping it and kicking it out to my session log, but it is not. So I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on there. What's likely happening is that it's finally exercising. So we know that it exercised this successfully because we got 2 responses with the whole warning baked into it, right? So we know we made it at least that far. And what I suspect is that after those next 2 iterations, we finally got to the 90% threshold, and it started to try to do this prune conversation thing, and that we've got some kind of a defect in here where this is not returning something or whatever. So we have to figure that out. But anyways, you can see where this is going. This is obviously like heads and tails a million times more um, than what we had the first time through. I am super excited about this project. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to future updates. If you would like to help beta test Cogitator Prime, uh, I am willing to hand out some deets on him. However, you know, just, you could do me a solid and go subscribe to my Substack. Maybe subscribe to the podcast too. Shameless plug. Um, I definitely do not want to paywall this dude that badly. Maybe what I'll do, what I'm considering is anybody can talk to Cogi and have a fun little chat, and ask him questions about digital heresy and all this other stuff, and just have him be a good all around dude. But maybe what I'll try to do is give him some additional personality perks um, for people that subscribe, and tier that off or whatever, so that it's not like a pay to win kind of a thing, but just more like a additional perks kind of a thing. Maybe he'll, maybe you can like opt in to have him like actually care to keep a rapport or keep a fan base of his number one fans and all this other stuff. I don't know. Submit your ideas and we'll consider them. Anyways, thanks everybody for watching. I really enjoyed this. I am so stoked to have gotten even this far. And what's astonishing and what I hope I inspire in other people is the fact that I have a programming background, but I do not have a Python background. And 100% of this was written as a combination of myself looking things up online, but more importantly, actually using ChatGPT in yet a third window, ChatGPT 4 specifically, which does a really good job of coding and helping with Python stuff and logic to derive a lot of the approach for how to do things like this. And so if you have an idea, you can absolutely go and action it today if you have the patience and the wherewithal to work within this context. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you all have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll catch you on the next one.